A humbled soldier was forced to strip. She came back in a Rafale and obliterated their base. The pilot wings hit the hangar floor with a hollow thud as Colonel Harrison stomped forward and ground Sarah Mitchell's insignia to dust. "You think they bent the rules for you," he hissed, voice echoing off steel girders. "Maybe we should hand you a pink beret, too." Unfazed, Sarah unpinned her wings and laid them beside the shredded fabric. A dagger entwined in wings glimmered at her throat. "I'll see you tomorrow," she murmured, and vanished into silence. But the quiet math teacher from Phoenix was once a classified F-22 ace, and tomorrow she'll return flying a Rafale. What would you do if they stripped your wings, then dared you to come back stronger? Sarah Mitchell lives in a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Phoenix, where red dust drifts through cracked windows and the summer sun shimmers like a mirage. At dawn, before the city stirs, she laces up faded running shoes and disappears into empty streets, 10 miles of solitary, pounding asphalt. No headphones, no small talk. By the time the sun peaks over Saguaros, she's already mapped every curve of pavement in her mind and erased every trace of her past life. Inside her home could pass for a minimalist showroom: white walls, a single threadbare couch, a bare kitchen counter holding only an old model cell phone, and a photograph so faded you can't quite make out the silhouette of a sleek fighter jet against a bleeding sunset. A lone bookshelf stands against the wall, crammed with dusty algebra textbooks, flight manual binders, and aviation journals no one else has bothered to open. Her neighbors know her as Miss Mitchell, the silent one in Unit 312, who never complains when children kick soccer balls against the wall. At Desert Valley High, she's the most reliable teacher in history. Never late, never ill, never drama. The principal jokes that she's like a ghost present but impossible to pin down. They don't know ghosts can carry secrets. Every evening, grading papers by lamplight, Sarah fingers the pages of her students' progress reports, the same neat cursive she used when she submitted her application to the Edwards Civilian to Military Pilot Program. In that form, she claimed exactly 500 hours in a Cessna 172 and nothing more. What they couldn't see was the 19 times that number logged in F-22's F-35s and classified prototypes parked in hangars that officially don't exist. She hasn't updated her resume in a decade, and her phone remains mostly silent. No social media, no tagged photographs of high G turns or midnight dogfights. When colleagues invite her to happy hour, she offers polite excuses about lesson plans and grading. Invitations dry up. People stop asking. But late one desert night, the official announcement lands in her inbox: Civilian Pilot Training Program, Edwards AFB. The signature at the bottom reads, Colonel Harrison. At that moment, something buried for years stirs deep in her chest, an echo of adrenaline from altitudes above 40,000 feet, when she was known only as Ghost. She stares at the application with fingers trembling. Memories of cockpit wind, of her perfected Herbst maneuver at 8 Gs of the mission that never officially happened, flood back. She fills in the blank fields with the same precision she teaches her students to solve quadratic equations. No embellishment, no lies, just half the truth. Tomorrow she tells herself she will walk onto that airfield under the harsh scrutiny of wealthy amateurs who think military aviation is a weekend hobby. They'll see a quiet, middle-aged schoolteacher. They'll never suspect she once ruled the skies. As she slides her faded Honda into the parking lot the next morning, she tightens the straps on a single black bag containing a flight suit with no name tag and a set of worn pilot's wings. The hangar doors loom ahead. Behind them, Colonel Harrison waits to test her limits. And beyond those walls, a darker force lies, in wait, an enemy she could never outmaneuver in the sky, until now. Sarah arrived for her first day at Edwards Air Force Base, dressed in a simple flight suit and carrying a single black duffel. The morning sun glinted off rows of sleek jets, but she passed them without a glance, heading straight for the briefing room where 40 other candidates milled about in designer sunglasses and custom flight bags. She felt their eyes curious, dismissive, amused, but she didn't pause. She sat in the very last row, opened her notebook, and wrote nothing about schedules or procedures. Instead, she sketched thrust-to-weight ratios optimized climb profiles, and margin of error curves in tiny, precise handwriting. Within minutes, the program's self-appointed Alpha Brad Thompson, the senator's son with 4,000 hours in a corporate Boeing, strutted past her seat and let his laughter ring out. "Hey, lost ma'am!" he called, voice-dripping condescension this way to the VIP lounge. A ripple of snickers followed. Sarah didn't look up. She simply tightened her grip on the pen and continued her calculations as though he were a mosquito buzzing near her ear. By week 2, the harassment had become systematic. During simulator sessions, hydraulics would fail at the worst possible moment. Just as she flared into a perfect overhead brake pattern, the screens would black out alarms, screaming. Technicians whispered, "Someone's hacking your profile," after hours. Whenever she asked for help, the technician's eyes flicked toward Colonel Harrison's office. He shrugged. "I'd tell the commander if I were you, but I wouldn't hold my breath." Outside the simulators, the campaign against her shifted to social warfare. Thompson organized study groups at the officers' club, forgetting to invite Sarah and the 3 other women. Over catered lunches, he lectured on real jet time and instinct, under mock stress, his voice carrying just loud enough for her to hear. Sarah let the words wash over her. She already knew that at Mach 1.5 instruments are lifelines, but she wondered whether any of these hobbyists could tell the difference. Colonel Harrison, who'd once ground her wings into dust, stepped onto that stage too. In every classroom lecture, he singled her out. Major Mitchell, he barked, during a systems class, explained the failure modes in the F-16 fly-by-wire versus the F-35. Sarah rose without hesitation, delivering 15 minutes of layered analysis, redundancy, architectures, software voting logic, probabilistic failure rates, before sitting down amid stunned silence. Harrison's face reddened. "Textbook memorization," he muttered. Not battlefield reality. As her technical triumphs piled up, so did the sabotage. Week 4, her locker was emptied. Her materials vanished. Week 6, her parking spot blocked by orange cones, the keys locked inside. The other women initially rallied. Jennifer Adams, Maria Santos, and Lisa Chen traded glances of solidarity in the hall, but Thompson's insidious whispers broke their unity. "Talent wasted on outsiders," he'd say softly to Jennifer, "and my father has long memories." Soon those smiles vanished. Sarah found herself alone in the crowded corridors. The program's midterms arrived like a gauntlet. The combat simulation pitting 2 4-ship formations should have been Sarah's moment of vindication. Instead, Harrison assigned her to lead the 3 least skilled pilots rookies who struggled with basic maneuvers against Thompson's elite quartet. In the control room, Harrison leaned forward, anticipation glinting in his eyes. He expected a massacre that would justify her dismissal. But Sarah had spent 12 weeks studying every cadet's habits, minute tells, under stress throttle adjustments, radio call patterns. As the simulation began, she commanded Phoenix Flight, "Kill your radars. We go dark." The novices obeyed without question, trusting her every word after the flawless formation drill 2 weeks earlier. For 30 seconds, they vanished, leaving Thompson's team scanning empty sky. Then Sarah's flight reappeared in devastating formation, firing 4 simultaneous missile launches timed to perfection. The control room erupted 4 kills in 8 seconds. They reset the sim. 6 seconds. 3 resets later, even Thompson's top pilots were applauding over the radio. Harrison's fury exploded. "This proves nothing except that your simulation parameters are broken," he snarled. "Real combat isn't a game, Mitchell. You endangered your wingman." His words echoed through the hangar, suppressing any applause. Sarah met his gaze calmly. She knew he was lying because he'd lied before. By week 12, the harassment reached its crescendo. During a routine formation evaluation, Harrison handpicked Sarah's flight card, "Lead 4 novices." Thompson gets the best guys. Before takeoff, he leaned in. "When you wash out, there's always a flight school for ground instructors." The words were meant as humiliation, but Sarah felt only the familiar calm descend over her mind, a clarity she hadn't tasted since her days as Ghost. In the T-38 cockpit, she addressed her wingmen. "Phoenix Flight, listen to my voice. Don't think, just follow." For 45 minutes they flew as one entity, novice pilots mirroring her every move, slip, roll, pitch, yaw, until the control room fell silent. When Thompson attempted to intercept, she used their predictability against them, weaving defensive geometry that even he couldn't penetrate. The replay showed perfect synchronization, wings, locked formation, unbreakable. Harrison watched, face ashen, first demanding a replay, then refusing to acknowledge what he saw. Outside the simulator, the control room buzzed with excitement. 3 terrified novices clung to her seriousness as they filed out. "Ma'am, I've never felt flying like that. It was like you were in my cockpit." Sarah allowed the first genuine smile in weeks. "You always had it in you," she said softly. But no one celebrated. They knew Harrison would strike back. That strike came the next morning. A memo pinned to the bulletin board accused Sarah of simulation score anomalies, security gaps in her file, and behavior detrimental to unit cohesion. An all-hands meeting was called in Hangar R7. 200 students and instructors formed a circle around Sarah, name crossed out in red on the briefing board. Harrison stepped into the center and delivered his indictment with bureaucratic precision, each charge vague enough to avoid legal challenge, but damning enough to destroy her career. "We trust our wingmen with our lives," he intoned, voice steeped in righteous fury. "How can we trust someone who flaunts the rules, isolates herself, and endangers others?" He glared at Thompson and the top cadets, nodding. "These are the future of aviation team players, not calculation-obsessed loners." A heavy silence followed. No one dared speak against him. Then his ultimatum. "Remove your uniform, voluntarily leave with whatever dignity you have, or be escorted out after I detail every failure." He paused, letting the words hang like guillotine blades. Sarah looked at the polished floor, then steadily back at him. Without a word, she unpinned her wings, peeled off her flight jacket, and laid them beside the shredded uniform. The thud of metal on concrete was deafening. She turned and walked away, her head held high, her destiny just beginning. Then, late that night, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, the shattered remnants of her military life laid out on the coffee table, a pair of wings clipped clean from her lapel, the shredded flight jacket, and a small wooden box she hadn't opened in 10 years. Inside lay her Lieutenant Colonel Oak leaves a Purple Heart and a distinguished Flying Cross, proof that she had once danced on the edge of death and lived. Underneath, her brother's last letter told her why she must never disappear again. Her phone buzzed with one incoming call, General Roberts. He'd been loyal when everyone else turned away. "I know what you're thinking," his gruff voice said. "You want to walk away and never look back. But Derek Coleman isn't done. He'll hurt more people unless we give him a reckoning he can't hide." Sarah's jaw clenched. Justice wasn't a spectacle until now. Roberts laid out the plan in low, urgent tones. There was a French Rafale on the ramp at Nellis, part of an Allied exchange. Under normal orders, it would never fly without weeks of paperwork. But he'd arranged a family emergency for the French captain and had logged all the diplomatic clearances. "You qualify as a test pilot on classified programs," he reminded her. "Your records still say you've been flying black-budget birds. Now it's time to show the world." He forwarded her a secure flight manifest. Within minutes, it appeared on her phone, permission granted. Ghost 0. Sarah closed her eyes. The plan was simple, but audacious. Arrive at Nellis at dawn, in a suit that bore no rank climb into the Rafale, and perform a tactical demonstration so public, so jaw-dropping, that not even Colonel Harrison could bury it. She would force his false narrative into the open and expose the man who had crushed her and killed her brother with one clean sweep of jet wash. She spent the next hours sharpening every detail. In her notebook, she sketched the hangar layout, the approach path, the rotation point off the runway. She memorized the tower frequency and the exact words to announce her call sign, Ghost 0, requesting tactical demonstration. She prepared a smoke generator cartridge with red, white, and blue plumes to mark the French colors and to paint an unmistakable message: justice is not silent. By 0500, her taxi glided through the gates of Nellis. The ramp lay empty, except for the Rafale, its delta wings bathed in floodlight. A lone master sergeant stood by the ladder, eyes reflecting admiration and fear. "Ma'am," he said softly. "General Roberts sends his regards. She's fueled-armed with training rounds. We're clear if you're ready." Sarah nodded, heart hammering. She pulled on a black flight suit, no name tape, no insignia, then clipped her old wings back onto the lapel, the dagger wrapped in wings tattoo just visible above the collar. She climbed the ladder, each rung a heartbeat, ticking toward reckoning. Inside the cockpit, she ran through the checklist with ritual precision. Pumps, gauges, hydraulics, green. The engine lit with a soft roar that built to a thunderous growl. In that moment, she was no longer the silent math teacher. She was Ghost Zero, a specter of retribution born on 4 afterburners. At exactly 06:30, she taxied onto the runway. Colonel Harrison, now back to calling himself Harrison, stood at the far hangar door, waiting to deliver his triumphant address about standards and unity. His voice boomed over the PA system. "Remember, excellence is earned, never granted." A thunderclap cut him off. The Rafale erupted down the runway, sonic boom cracking like a whip overhead. Phones snapped to faces. A split second later, the jet tore past the hangar in a perfect knife-edge pass, barely 20 feet off the ground, the French roundels glowing in the dawn light. Inside the ship, Sarah keyed the mic Ghost Zero, requesting tactical demonstration. "Edwards Tower, clear us for unlimited airspace. Repeat, unlimited." A pause. Then the controller's wire crackled with restrained excitement. "Ghost Zero, you are cleared. Make it count." What followed was 20 minutes of impossible aerobatics, a tailslide that bled airspeed yet held altitude, a Pugachev's Cobra that froze onlookers in place, a rolling circle so smooth it made the jet look alive. At one point she cut throttle mid-roll and fell like a stone, then ripped the stick back and tumbled into the vertical climb, every move a message. Back in the hangar, Colonel Harrison's face drained of color. His speech vanished from his lips as the French smoke snaked overhead in a giant arc, spelling out JUSTICE. Phones recorded hearts thundered, the world watched. When she finally landed and walked away from the cockpit, the crowd's stunned silence shattered into frenzied applause. Cameras flashed. Roberts's agents moved in, not to detain her, but to place Colonel Harrison in handcuffs for conspiracy fraud and the wrongful death of Captain James Mitchell. Sarah slipped into the morning light, wings pinned to her chest, the sky above wide and empty, her stage reclaimed. At first light, the French Rafale sat alone on the Nellis flight line, its delta wings gleaming wet in the pre-dawn floodlights. Sarah Mitchell emerged from the shadows, wearing a plain black flight suit. No rank patches, no name tape. Her clipped wings pinned modestly over her heart. A single master sergeant saluted, handing her a helmet taped with the call sign, Ghost Zero. Her heart thundered, but her expression was calm. She climbed into the cockpit as though returning to an old friend. With practiced precision, she ran through the pre-flight checklist, hydraulics, green fuel, at maximum training rounds loaded. The Rafale's twin M88 engines ignited in a whisper that swelled into a roar, rattling the empty ramp. She eased the throttles forward, the jet's nose lifting into the dark sky. Below, Colonel Harrison raised his hand in a hollow salute. Tonight he would speak of standards, but first he would witness their true meaning. At exactly 06:30 hours, Ghost Zero rolled onto the runway with surgical intent. The hangar doors trembled as she opened the afterburners, the roar cracking the still air. In one fluid motion, she released the brakes and shot down the tarmac sonic boom, splitting the silence like a guillotine's blade. Phones snapped up faces. Harrison froze mid-sentence, his planned reprimand lost in the thunder. As the Rafale cleared the hangar at just 20 feet altitude, Sarah eased into a perfect knife-edge pass, the earth rolling beneath her wingtip. A plume of red-white-blue smoke unfurled from beneath the fuselage, painting a scar across the sky, an unmistakable flag of defiance. Her voice crackled over the hangar PA, calm and unwavering. Ghost Zero, Edwards Tower. Request tactical demonstration. Unlimited. A crackle of static. Then the controller's voice. Ghost Zero, you are cleared. Airspace is yours. Show us what you've got. She climbed with ruthless precision, the Rafale's engines screaming as it pierced through 10,000 feet in seconds. Without pausing, she rolled inverted eyes fixed on the horizon as the world spun beneath. Then came the tail slide. She pulled the nose skyward until the jet nearly stalled, then hung there, engines screaming at idle before controlled fallback into level flight. Below, instructors and cadets watched jaws drop. "Holy," a voice whispered into a phone. "That's impossible." But she was only beginning. Sarah pushed into a Pugachev's Cobra, pitching up at near 90 degrees airflow, stalling the wings for a heart-stopping moment, then snapping forward into a dive that pointed the Rafale straight at the earth. The crowd winced. Phones captured every frame. She recovered at the last instant, skimming treetops in a downward spiral before climbing back out in a hammerhead stall so tight the jet seemed to rotate on its nose like a floodlight sweeping across the desert. The smoke generator traced each arc, spelling out a giant JUSTICE that hung in the sky like a neon banner. No one dared speak as Sarah throttled back, banking for the next maneuver. She leveled off at 15,000 feet, then cut the engines to idle. The Rafale fell like a stone in a controlled flat spin, her hands steady on the stick as the world whirled in a blur of metal and sky. At 5,000 feet, she punched the amidships spin recovery, kicking the jet back into level flight with a jolt that rattled the canopy. Her next trick was an inverted high G slip, rolling the jet upside down, banking sharply into a 4G turn that pressed her into her seat as the ground inverted beneath her. The stunt was so tight that loose papers scattered from the hangar office floated upward for a moment before settling back down, proof that physics bowed only to skill. Then came the grand finale. From 20,000 feet, she plunged into a vertical dive, pulling up into a flat spin descent that would shred inferior airframes. The Rafale rocked in a controlled corkscrew, smoke trailing like a falling ribbon. Cameras whirled, instructors scrambled for screens. At 1,000 feet, she slammed the stick forward, nose dropping, then hammered the throttles back to max, rocketing the jet back vertical in a plume of afterburner fire that painted the morning sky in molten gold. Below, Colonel Harrison's face was ashen. His lips quivered as he barked into a handset, but no one cared. They were witnessing the rebirth of a ghost. Sarah leveled off at runway altitude and throttled back to taxi speed. She cut the engine's silence, flooding back over the flight line. The red, white, blue smoke lingered overhead, a gauntlet thrown down. She opened the canopy, unbuckled her harness, and climbed out. Without hesitation, she unpinned her old wings from the lapel and placed them on the cockpit rail, no longer a student, but a legend reclaiming her legacy. As she stepped onto the tarmac, federal agents and General Roberts strode forward. Behind them, Colonel Harrison was escorted in handcuffs, booked for conspiracy false reporting and the wrongful death of Captain James Mitchell. Roberts's voice echoed across the ramp. Today we learned that silent strength can roar louder than any engine. Today justice flew on Rafale wings. Sarah turned her gaze skyward one last time. The desert sun had risen fully now, and the sky was wide open, untamed, unforgiving, and hers again. She tucked her helmet under her arm and walked away, the crowd parting in reverent silence. The runway lay empty, save for the smoke that still spelled out her promise. No uniform could bind her, no injustice could clip her wings. Sarah strode off the ramp as the engines fell silent, her black flight suit stained with the dust of the desert. A stunned hush fell over the crowd before phones and cameras erupted in a frenzy. Instructors who had once sneered now gaped mouths agape as federal agents and General Roberts approached Colonel Harrison, handcuffs glinting in the sunrise. Derek Coleman Roberts announced, voice ringing across the flight line, "You are under arrest for conspiracy, filing false reports, and the wrongful death of Captain James Mitchell." At the crack of that proclamation, the atmosphere shifted. Cadets who had stood rigid in loyalty to Harrison exhaled relief. Others wept quietly, realizing how close they'd stood to injustice. Brad Thompson. Once the program's self-styled alpha lowered his gaze and stepped forward. In a voice trembling with remorse, he addressed the silent field. "I was wrong to judge her. Sarah, I'm sorry for every moment I let them push you aside. I promise to use my influence for real change." Behind him, the 3 novice pilots who had flown under Sarah's lead in the simulator, Phoenix 2, 3, and 4, pulled small ghost patches from their pockets and pinned them to their uniforms. Their tears glittered in the dawn light as they exchanged hugs, each patch a symbol of trust reborn. News helicopters descended as Roberts guided Harrison into a waiting SUV. Live feeds captured every frame Sarah's resolute silhouette against the pale sky, her clipped wings back in place, her eyes unflinching. The world watched Ghost Zero reclaim her legacy in real time. Back at Edwards, the base commander convened an emergency press briefing. Reporters fanned out microphones thrust forward as she announced sweeping reforms, independent oversight of training programs, anti-retaliation safeguards for all candidates, and a council of former combat pilots, Sarah included, to redesign evaluation criteria. Headlines flashed, "Teacher turned ace, rewrites the rules," and Ghost Zero's flight spurs military reckoning. Meanwhile, on the tarmac, Thompson knelt with the 3 novices at Sarah's feet. "You showed me what real leadership looks like," he said softly. "Thank you." Tears traced down their cheeks as Sarah placed her hand over his. "Leadership isn't about rank," she replied. "It's about lifting others up." By midday, Sarah was back in her apartment in Phoenix, grading algebra. Finals the faded photograph of a fighter jet still on her counter. A reporter dialed her number for an interview. She declined politely. The students at Desert Valley High would get their lesson tonight, not from the press, but from their teacher's calm voice, guiding them through quadratic equations. That evening, the school auditorium hummed with excitement. Word had spread that Ms. Mitchell of Unit 312 had flown a Rafale in a coup that ended a corrupt commander's career. Students filed in eyes wide, clutching signed copies of her class syllabus. On the blackboard, she wrote a single equation, and beneath it inscribed, "Problems have solutions." As the students solved for X, she moved among them, smiling. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in the same red-white-blue she had left above Nellis. In the weeks that followed, petitions circulated at congressional offices urging recognition of her heroism. Minority-focused aviation groups adopted her story as inspiration. Even the Pentagon quietly began awarding her counsel more weight in policy meetings. But through it all, Sarah remained unchanged, the quiet math teacher who ran 10 miles at dawn, who graded papers by lamplight, who believed every student and every pilot deserved to find their own wings. And so when asked by reporters whether she'd ever return to military service, she only smiled and said, "I have a mission right here, teaching tomorrow's leaders to solve for X, and to never let anyone tell them the sky isn't big enough." In that moment, her students learned the final lesson of Ghost Zero's flight. True power isn't measured by altitude or rank, but by the courage to stand tall and to lift others up when the world tries to hold you down. Sarah Mitchell's journey teaches us that real strength often hides behind quiet resolve. She refused to be defined by a uniform or by the slights of those who underestimated her. Instead of retaliation born of anger, she chose a demonstration of impossible skill, one that exposed corruption and reclaimed dignity, not only for herself, but for everyone who had been sidelined. Her tactics reveal a deeper truth about leadership. It isn't wielded through intimidation or by crushing dissent. It's forged through preparation integrity and a relentless commitment to fairness. Sarah spent years perfecting her craft in silence, knowing that when the moment came, excellence would speak louder than accusations or political gamesmanship. In the hangar, her calculated maneuvers weren't just aerobatic feats, they were a manifesto precision, and collaboration can dismantle entrenched power. We also learn the cost of complicity. The cadets and instructors who stayed silent in the face of injustice became unwitting witnesses to their own failure of courage. Their eventual support after Sarah's flight underscores how one act of visible justice can awaken collective conscience. True inclusion doesn't dilute standards, it demands that excellence be accessible to all who work for it. Psychologically, Sarah's restraint under relentless harassment exemplifies mastery over emotion. She allowed her adversaries to doubt her strength, then struck when they least expected with evidence so undeniable it could not be buried. This approach reminds us that the most powerful response isn't always the loudest. It's the one that balances moral clarity with tactical precision. Finally, her return to teaching highlights a profound lesson. Legacy isn't measured by medals or media headlines, but by the lives we uplift. By refusing public accolades, Sarah affirmed that impact lies in empowering others, whether in the cockpit or the classroom. So ask yourself, when you're stripped of respect, do you retaliate in kind, or do you prepare for a moment when excellence itself becomes your vindication? The sky doesn't care about politics or prejudice. It only honors skill, courage, and the willingness to lift others higher. Sarah Mitchell's story doesn't end on the runway. It lives in every student who dares to solve the impossible, every pilot who refuses to stay grounded by doubt. Remember this: no uniform, no rank, no smear campaign can strip you of your potential. The sky doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to the prepared, the persistent, the fearless. If you've ever been told you don't belong, take a page from Ghost Zero's flight manual. Hone your skills, sharpen your resolve, and let your excellence do the talking. Share your own story of rising above adversity in the comments below. Have you ever faced a Coleman in your life, and how did you reclaim your wings? If Sarah's journey inspired you, subscribe now for more tales of underdogs who turned the tables with grit and grace. Hit the like button to show that you stand with those who fight, not with anger, but with mastery. And ring the bell so you never miss a story that proves true: courage can't be grounded. Because at the end of the day, greatness isn't about proving others wrong. It's about lifting yourself and everyone around you into the clear blue beyond. Keep flying true.